coming up on the payoff, we talk about the fact that in sobriety, there are so many ways, especially now, and so many resources out there to stop drinking. Jean McCarthy is one of those resources, and she has a different way to stop drinking, much like all of us, right? You stop drinking first, and then you deal with the rest of the problem, which usually is you. She's just got incredible lessons about her 10 years plus in sobriety, what it was like for her to get sober. She is was an extremely high-functioning alcoholic on the big stage. She's from Canada, so it's a cold stage, especially right now. And she was involved in so many things before she got sober, and she talks about that being part of her problem. A lot of people, I'm sure, listening to this can relate to it. You're going, and at some point you realize, not only am I an alcoholic, but I'm addicted to the going. And she talks about finding space for herself and even letting some things go now. She's got a successful podcast going for 10 years now called The Bubble Hour, and she's getting ready to step away from that. But it's a podcast where if you search sobriety in podcasts, it's going to be the first 1, 2, or 3 that comes up. So Jean McCarthy is a special person. She's a special guest, and she brings to us a different way that people can get sober, but it's a special way. And talking to her today helped me out. So here's another guy that always helps us out as we get started. I guess, let's say Jean is around Calgary. Kevin is further southwest in Hermosa Beach, California. You know what I'm talking about. Kevin Souza.
Hello, Jean here.
Hey, Jean.
Hello.
It's Pete. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Pete?
You're great. You sound really good. You sound just like you do on your podcast and other stuff. You have a great voice.
Oh, thanks. Well, that's good to hear.
Are you and I
talk all the time.
Yeah, right. It's encouraging. Me too. So are you in Alberta, Canada today?
That's right. I am. I'm looking out at a very snowy landscape and a big blue sky.
I was about to ask you, how cold is it there today? I know this time of year, you're basically like people that are listening to this, Americans that don't have good geographical sense. You guys are almost like, I guess, north of like Montana and Wyoming, kind of?
Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm 90 minutes north of the Montana border. And it's so cold that my little dog ran outside to do her morning business, and she was hopping around.
Did you have to go get her?
Paws out of the snow. I had to throw on some slippers and run out and rescue her.
That's the worst, because we just want him to go in and come back.
Yeah. That's life in Canada.
How long did you grow up in Canada?
Mm-hmm. In fact, I grew up in this exact town that I live in still to this day, which is unusual, I think. Most people don't stay in one place this long. And
what part of Alberta are you by? Like Edmonton, Calgary, like?
I'm south of Calgary. So if you know where Calgary is, I'm just halfway between Calgary and the U.S. border.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, just so you know, to get you comfortable, Mike can hear. He's our producer. Mike, say hi. There he is.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, the guy would suck on Jeopardy. And so we are going to, I'll give an intro. So I won't bother you with that. And then we'll go into this. I'll talk to people about, your books, your podcast, your blog. And you said your podcast is winding down?
Mm-hmm. It is. Season 10 is the final season.
Really? So what brought about the wind down? 10 years. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like I just hit a bunch of milestones. 10 years, and we did 4 million downloads, and it just sort of felt like, I think it's just, my gut just told me, you know what, it's really time. It's time to end on a high note, finish while it's good, and just go back to kind of, living my recovery and serving in other ways.
I've read about you, listened to you, and one of the things you say, I feel like I know a lot of men and women like you, but I know a lot of women like you who I feel are still maybe you were very high functioning when you were drinking, it sounds like. And
Yep.
you
Yep.
were busy, busy, busy.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
and you said that was kind of almost a symptom of the whole disease, maybe.
I think so. And I think it's hard to spot, because the world rewards that busyness. And so it's so confusing because you think, well, why, like, my gut tells me I'm doing everything wrong and the world tells me to keep going because, they like this. But I mean, everybody likes the person who's doing too much and giving away every little bit of themselves
Yeah.
and to their own detriment. And I think, I had enough stability in my life to give me, I guess, the what I needed to stop and to take care of myself the way I needed to. So there's a certain amount of, they call it recovery capital. Are you familiar with that term?
No,
Have you ever used
please.
that term?
No, tell me.
So it's something I learned reading the materials from the Recovery Research Institute, which is a fantastic organization. They have a great newsletter, and they post all kinds of studies and research into various types of treatment and recovery and addiction and outcomes. And one thing they talk about is recovery capital, and that is really, what do you have going for you that helps you get out of this? What can you harness and take forward? And so something like housing security would be considered recovery capital, right? I mean, if you're on the street, your primary concern really might not be getting sober. It's probably just where you're going to sleep tonight. So, I mean, you first look at just the basic needs in life, but then you can kind of move up in terms of, do you have emotional support? Do you have any secondary issues or not? So, mental health would be considered an element of recovery capital. Do you have time and space to look after yourself? So I think when you're talking to someone who's really just struggling to get by, their recovery capital might not be sufficient for them to have early intervention and quit on their own. And that's where it's so great that we have these programs where you can just plug right into them and take advantage of the capital that's there, right? Whether it's 12-step or smart recovery or, a rehab program, if you're lucky enough to get into that, like that, where those supports are there for you, and then you can lean on the recovery capital of the group.
How did you discover you had that recovery capital? And because we'll get into your story because I'm really interested because you're interesting. But how did you tap into that recovery capital, or did you even realize that when you decided to stop or when you had to stop?
No, I learned, I saw it in retrospect. Everything's so clear in hindsight, especially when you're not loaded. But at the time, I didn't know. But I kind of was just going on my gut and my instinct. And I think that I could feel myself sliding into it. I mean, when you're trying to quit every day and end up drinking more by the end of the day, this is getting better and not worse, right? So I think really initially what I grabbed onto was probably fear and shame, and not the best tools, but for me, they motivated me enough to do, to quit and to get help and to make changes. But I also told myself, this is it. If I can't do it myself this time, I'm going to a meeting. I'm going to get help. This is it. Like, I'm doing this come hell or high water. And because I think what I had was a real realization that this was life or death. I mean, not immediate life or death, the way it is for someone who's in the hospital with liver failure. But it was like, this is what I'm moving towards. Like, this is where this is taking me. I've got to stop or I'm going to get there. And now I've forgotten exactly your question. How did I know? I didn't know. I went on instincts, but with the promise to myself that if I couldn't do it the way I was trying to do it, then I would keep adding more until I got it done.
You mentioned women in particular, because you kind of see, you saw that it was life and death, or that it was headed in that direction. And I've heard you say something real interesting. You said women in particular are at risk of dying from this when they don't even really realize it. And you talked about, dying through falls and things like that. That was something like, as a guy, I really don't even think about that. Or I never had heard that before. And I found it to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Our bodies don't metabolize alcohol quite the same. And I think there's a great book by Canadian journalist Anne Dowsett Johnston called Drink. And it focuses on how the alcohol industry and culture is affecting women in this era, and how what she calls the pinkification of alcohol marketing has really changed in the last 20 years, with the whole wine mom culture thing. But I also just think that this is kind of a new phenomenon. We're seeing the outcome of it. I'm 54, so when I was in my really, formative years in the 1970s of like looking around at the women I admired and wanted to be like, it was in that era that women can have it all. We can work, we can have kids, we can do all these things. And, that was revolutionary at the time, even though now, we kind of shrug and we're like, well, yeah, that goes without saying. But, my mother's generation, they were either nurses or teachers, and most of them quit working when they had a family because their new career was being a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that we could do all this and we just know, we're inventing it as we go.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, the alcohol industry looked at this demographic of women who are doing everything without a real blueprint for how to do it, and maybe saw. I'd like to think that they weren't completely predatory. Maybe they sort of saw like this is an easy market, but.
Mm-hmm.
But that marketing to women has, sort of
it's definitely
normalized.
Evolved.
Yeah. It's normalized the type of drinking and kind of giving that like a sense of humor or an excuse, and really glossed over the fact that it's a carcinogen. I mean, we wouldn't tolerate that kind of nonsense with smoking or tanning beds. I mean, we figured that out, but somehow with alcohol, it's like, oh, that's so cute, little T-shirts and onesies that joke about alcohol, but secretly it's really hurting women and men. But I mean, it's really doing a lot of damage. And I'm so glad that we're able to talk about this and be honest about it, and just giving ourselves space to tell the truth through podcasts like yours and like mine. It just shines a light on it and kind of just blows these things out of the water, because they really don't stand up when you start talking about them. That alcohol helps, momming is hard, alcohol helps. I mean, come on, that's just silly.
Yeah, that's nonsense, especially if you're an alcoholic, because you kind of know at some point what you're doing is wrong. When did you know that you were an alcoholic? Like if somebody's out there listening and they're not sure, when was the moment where you said, it's the opposite of like an aha moment, I guess. It's like, oh man, one of those moments. When did you discover that?
I think, I really resisted using that word for myself, because I felt like I was confused by it, Pete. Like I was so afraid that I didn't qualify. And I think that's the problem of being kind of high functioning and quitting early in the trajectory. Like I could feel that I was addicted. I could feel that. Like I can't quit and I'm drinking more. That's addiction. But I was so afraid that if I went to a meeting and said I'm an alcoholic, here's what I'm doing, that someone would say, no, you're not bad enough yet. Go drink some more and come back when you're worse.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't happen, as it turns out, in meetings. But that was my fear, because I was so afraid. I knew this was it. Like, this was my chance. Something inside of me had broken open and knew, rather than knowing I'm an alcoholic, I think the voice that I heard on the day that everything changed was, I kind of felt like a slap on my chest, and I heard the words in my head, I need to quit drinking. So that was like, it was just it was an epiphany that I didn't have to wait for a rock bottom. I was drinking more and more, thinking, okay, well, this is how I understood it worked. Like when you're an alcoholic, you hit rock bottom, and then you quit. Then you're officially an alcoholic, and then you can join the club, and then you never drink again, and then that's the cure. So thinking that I had to keep drinking until I hit a rock bottom kept me drinking. And when I had this epiphany of like, listen, I don't have to wait for something to happen. I can just quit. Like the knowledge alone is enough. That was really an eye-opener. So then...
Well, it's courageous too, because a lot of people, I'm sure, were like, wait, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I kept it pretty quiet because I was hiding it. Mm-hmm. And again, I was afraid of, here's my experience when I tell my friends drunk, I need to quit drinking. They'd say, you're fine. Like if you're an alcoholic, we're alcoholics. And well, I didn't want to hurt their feelings. So, I was like, okay, we're all good. Let's keep drinking. So when I decided I was going to quit, I thought I have to stop telling people that I'm quitting because they keep telling me I'm okay. So I didn't even tell my husband. And
who, by the way, was your high school sweetheart, right?
Yeah.
Was your boyfriend in the 12th grade?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, you did your homework.
I did. And that's a great way, by the way, that just shows how well we hide it. Here's somebody that's been in your life, your partner, since you're 18, and they don't know. And guess what? It's not really on them to know. A lot of times we're that good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of us are really other focused, that really kind of codependent personality that really relies on other people to reflect our worth back to us. So for me to have an inner knowing was very rare. I kind of only saw myself the way other people saw me. And I really didn't value my own opinion because I thought nothing of myself. So, it didn't so much matter that I knew I was struggling. To me, it was only real if people saw me struggling. And I think that's why it really felt like an epiphany to maybe for the first time to really value my own knowledge and to really listen to my gut and think like, I don't need something to tell me this is bad. I can just quit.
If you're doing something for a while and you're able to get away with it or whatever, or quote unquote, air quotes, get away with it, and nobody else knows, that doesn't make it okay. It took me a long time. I'm still learning that. Right? it's day to day. It's, hey, like, a guy on this podcast, just the one before you and I are chatting right now, he talked about, if it's a secret, it's probably the wrong thing. And
yeah. And yet there's so much shame. Like I had so much shame that I was just so fearful, I think, of everything unraveling, and it didn't so much, I don't know, I just was so fearful of sort of that imposter syndrome of being called out or having, everything I've built kind of come crashing down around me. But when you realize like, well, this is what I'm doing is going to kill me. And before it kills me, it's going to ruin my life. Like there's no way this can go forward the way it's going and end well. So something's got to change.
You mentioned, you mentioned the life you built. You were, you were a singer, right? You guys had a business you owned. You were the face of that business. You were on TV all the time. And that is, I'm sure there's that can be a risky proposition. Those can be a lot of reasons why you don't want to stop, because could that harm these? I'm speaking for you, but is that a consideration? Like if I do this could be tough on things that are very close to me and things that I've built.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much pressure in that way. And as a business owner, you know that you've got employees whose livelihood depends on the success of your company. And, it's a small community, so business owners, everybody kind of knows, like the names of the pharmacy owner and the home builders and the car dealers and stuff. You're like little celebrities in your own little community. And so there's sort of that family honor and not wanting to embarrass my kids who were, all teenagers at that time. And just so much. Yeah, there's so much pressure. And then also, I think I was very judgmental of other people, and I didn't realize that. I think part of how I felt safe or okay was as long as I'm like a little bit better than somebody else, I'm okay. So as long, I don't like saying that. I'm kind of embarrassed I felt that way, but I'm hoping I can put it in a way that resonates.
No, I mean,
that makes sense.
Yeah,
and,
that's,
you know,
that makes perfect sense.
At the time, I would have said I had very high standards.
Yeah.
But what that translated to is, I feel like I had to be a little bit better than other people because I felt like I was kind of not worthy of anything. So I had to try harder than others. So if you're hard on yourself, chances are you're judgmental of others. You might have
for
been
sure.
trained that way.
Yeah.
But that's really what that comes from.
No, and
it's amazing how when you start healing yourself and accepting yourself, all of a sudden you can sure be a lot nicer to the people around you too.
Yeah, kindness is a huge part for me of getting sober, like a depth to that kindness, and I think that's so important. You talked a little bit about just a moment ago about the fact that when you are kind of being a little better or seeing yourself in that light, and it's that terminal uniqueness, right? Like that,
yeah.
like I'm different. I still have that issue. I don't know. I used to say jokingly, my mom did a number on me, like tell me how great I was as a kid. But that's not true. It's basically, I mean, sure, some of that to make up, as a child, but at the same time, it is always that I'm unique. And it's that, and it keeps you out of the solution for a long time. Like I'm different than these people. It's a really shitty place to be. And, to be a part of is so much better than to tell yourself or to believe that you're unique, because then you're dealing with the secrets. Then you don't want to share your problems because people won't understand because you're, this person in society or X, Y, or Z, when really it's just, you tell somebody what's going on with you, you take the power away from it 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And when I think about people I admire, they are people that are really, plain spoken and honest and truthful about themselves. And when I see other people do that, I just admire it so much. So I know that it's something I've always wanted for myself. I love the term that I heard from AA friends, which is the egomaniac with the inferiority complex. That really resonated with me.
It's so true. I want to get into your story a little bit. Was there, as you know, an alcoholism in your family?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's alcoholism. So this is really kind of a great part of my story is that my dad got sober when he was in his early 20s, before he was married. He was in the Air Force and was a navigator in the 1950s and had a terrible problem with alcohol. And I guess his supervisor came to him and said, you can quit flying or you can quit drinking. What's it going to be? And he said there was no choice. He hands down went to AA and quit drinking because flying was so important to him. So for me growing up, I grew up in a household where my mom maybe had like a sip of sherry at somebody's Christmas party, but my parents didn't really drink. And I remember being maybe 5 years old and my sister saying, our dad's an alcoholic. And I was like, no, he isn't. And so I went and asked him, like, why do my sisters say you're an alcoholic? And he says, oh, yeah, when you're an alcoholic, you have to quit drinking and you can never drink again. So I don't drink because I can't. Like, I had to quit and I never can again.
How did that affect you?
Well, I think it felt normal at the time, but I think, what he did for me was just really sort of set the example and set what would you call it? Like a bar, like just that was sort of a normal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. So I understood that solution all along, but I never saw him be dysfunctional.
He was happy. He was AA sober?
Yeah, well, he got sober in AA, but then we lived out in the country, and he didn't stay in the Air Force. He went into farming after he got married. So he wasn't active in AA when I was growing up, but he never drank again.
Okay.
I would say he probably could have benefited from continuing with the program in terms of emotional growth.
Yeah, sure.
But because I think, definitely there was probably some, as with all people, some stuff that.
Oh, give me a week away from my, my support group, right? And for me, it's a 12-step community. People around me will start to notice a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there was some of that there, but I'm really, really grateful for that example in my life. And yet, I didn't. Even you would think that would make it maybe it did make it easier for me to see it. Maybe that's why I was able to do something about it early on. But in a way, it also gave me this idea of what an alcoholic was, and I wasn't it. And I had a hard time really qualifying myself for that.
Uh-huh.
So when you asked, when did I see myself as an alcoholic? Honestly, it wasn't until I was a couple of days without alcohol and I felt the physical withdrawals. That really brought home to me the true unquestioning reality that I was addicted to alcohol. I was going through a physical detox. I could feel that in my body. It was so hard to not drink. And I think that's when I really realized it. Was that, this was real.
Towards the end, what was it like, a day of drinking for you? Like, what did it start early? Did it end late? Like, how was the routine?
So it would begin with me waking up and taking Tylenol for what I thought were normal aches and pains. I was 43 at the time, so really what's a normal ache and pain for a healthy 43-year-old? Probably nothing, but
Mm-hmm.
I needed a couple Tylenol to get started. So I don't take Tylenol anymore. Now I'm 54. I don't need Tylenol to start my day. So I can assume through reasoning that perhaps I was hungover every day, but I didn't see it as that. And I would start every day saying, today's the day. I'm not going to drink today. This is it. I can feel it. I'm done. And I would get dressed and go to work. And then throughout the morning, I literally would just be so excited. This is it. This is my day. I'm going to quit drinking today. And then by noon, I'd be like, well, maybe today's not the day because, and then fill in the blank, right? Something good happened and I need to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
Something bad happened and I need to commiserate. A friend is coming over and I need to host. There was always a reason where I would start to question if I could if it was convenient.
Yeah.
And
because your life was so big.
There was, right. And also, by that point in the day, X number of hours since my last drink, your body starts to go into withdrawal, and then it starts to look for a way to fix that, which is to have more alcohol. So there's kind of that cycle going on. So then I would just, grab onto whatever reason I had to give myself a pass that today would not be the day. And then I would start maybe about 2 p.m, start to really obsess about what alcohol did I have at home. So was there enough at home for me that night? Did I need to stop and get more on the way home? So I'd wrestle with myself, distracted all afternoon by that thought. And then what was starting to happen was that, and when I first started drinking regularly in my 30s, it was a glass of wine before bed. And then as the next decade progressed, it became like, well, wine with dinner and then after dinner and then bed. And so I was kind of, by the time I quit, getting to the point where I'd sort of, walk in and pour a drink as soon as I got home from work and poured in a coffee cup and kind of hide it on the counter and sip while I cooked dinner and then pretend I was opening a bottle of wine with dinner or pretend I was having my first glass during dinner when I'd really been drinking for a while. And what was happening was that need to go home and have that drink was happening earlier and earlier in the day.
You're finding excuses to go and leave work or to get home.
Yeah. So I wasn't drinking at work. I wasn't driving drunk. But because as a business owner, I really had quite a lot of control over my own schedule, I was able to accommodate
What was the
my
business, by the
drinking.
way?
Home building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we built hundreds of homes in our community here in this town that I've grown up in. And we've since retired. The market shifted quite a lot, and we decided that it's good to be in business when it's a profitable business, but kind of a lot of stress when the market's not so good. So we've since retired.
And you were like the face. You were the face of this company.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. So I have this gift of gab, right? This radio voice.
For sure.
Did some modeling as a teenager, so I'm quite composed speaking publicly.
Yeah, you got good looks too.
I grew up.
Go ahead. Yeah, you can say it.
Thank you. I could hold my own.
Yeah.
So what I learned quickly was that there wasn't a lot of women at that time in this industry. And so when I would turn up on behalf of our company, I just always got a little bit more attention, or I could just, if you can capture someone's attention for an extra 3 seconds and then hold your own, you can really be heard. So we figured out pretty quickly that it worked well for me to be the face of the company. I understood the business. I understood the industry. I could speak well to it. And also it was just kind of unusual for a woman my age at the time to be, a senior manager and a spokesperson about the building industry.
Sure.
So we capitalized on that. And in those days, people watched the local news. And so I was very often, in fact, every day when I left the house, I made sure I was camera ready because there was a good chance I'd be on the news that day, because we constantly did press releases and offered commentary. And, oh gosh, I forgot about this. I actually had my own little cable channel show for a while there.
Okay.
Where
nice.
where we would take a camera through houses and talk about design and home building and that kind of stuff.
Okay,
So
they got
locally,
a couple here in Central Texas, Chip and Joanna Gaines. You sound like you figured it out before they did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and people in our community often joke to my husband and I that we're the Chip and Joanna of Lethbridge. Those are big boots to fill, so my hat's off to them. But it was a small town version of that, right?
Yeah.
And it's all relative. So
but you
put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah,
when
for
you're
sure.
in those positions.
Yeah, and so how does the drinking play into any of that? Like, you were a musical artist. Was there drinking that fueled that creativity, or did you feel like there was a need for it there?
Well, some musicians party and have fun. I was a solo performing songwriter, so I really couldn't be drunk on stage. I needed all of my faculties. You can't miss a note. You can't miss a chord when it's just you and your guitar and your voice on stage. And so I had a lot of anxiety before I went on stage, but I knew I couldn't drink because I needed to perform well. So what happened then was then I would drink after I performed to kind of try to calm my nerves. But as my drinking escalated, my anxiety escalated. And what started happening was that I was canceling gigs, I was canceling shows, because it was kind of a side hustle. It was something I was doing for fun, and it had taken off, and I was doing way more than I ever thought I would. And it just kind of became this runaway train. And I loved and still enjoy writing and singing, but I didn't realize how difficult performing solo was going to be. So I had to get myself out of that. And it was just unmanageable. I mean, that's the word that really is the umbrella term for the end stage alcohol use for me, Pete. It was just unmanageable. I was doing too much. I was trying to fit alcohol in, like literally in my suitcase on business trips when I was going to home builder conventions or speaking at
because you got to make sure that you're going to have whatever enough is for you.
Yeah, and alone in your hotel room, right?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't drink in the bar didn't want to be seen doing that. I judged other people for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the irony, right? Yeah.
So, from the outside, I don't know what it looked like. Like, maybe if you saw me, you might think I was very uptight, inexplicably busy, oddly accomplished, and, pleasant, but awfully uptight for someone who seemed to have everything going for her.
How were your
I think that's really
relationships?
probably how it looked.
Go ahead. So you looked uptight. How were your relationships?
That's such a good question. How are my relationships? I think with my marriage, good. That was good. As good as it can be when you're hiding that you're hurting and struggling, right? So it was good, but it's better now. Like, now it's great.
Yeah.
It was such a relief when I finally.
How did he
I was
receive
10 days
that?
sober. Oh, I'm so lucky. This cute guy in my grade 12 math class turned out to be a really great, great human. I had no idea.
Yeah, you scored.
So he trusted me when I told him, listen, I quit drinking 10 days ago, and I think I have to stick with this. I was addicted. I was hiding it from you. And he listened. Gosh, it makes me almost cry telling you about it now, because it's just really, I feel so lucky. He listened, and he believed me, and he trusted my judgment. So he never tried to talk me out of it. And he was quiet for a while, but he never questioned it. And then a couple days later, he came back, and we had kind of a closed-door meeting at work. And he said, what does this mean for me? Like, what do you need from me? Do I have, what's the expectation? Do I have to quit drinking? Does this change? Like, what does this mean? And I didn't know enough at the time to say, gosh, it would be super helpful if we had an alcohol-free home. I was still in the people-pleasing, I'm okay, everything's all right stage. So I said, nothing has to change. It's just me that has to change. And I wished I'd had known better than to say that at the time, but that's what I was stuck with. I think I was fearful.
Yeah, that's where you were.
Yeah. So I didn't really, I was doing it on my own, so I didn't really have good guidance. But he still, fortunately, he was wiser than me. So what he said that day, early on, was he said, if you're doing this and you're serious about it, I'm going to hold you to it. So this means that, if we're out to dinner, you can't just change your mind. I'm going to hold you to it. And if you decide to stop this, to stop not drinking, then we have to talk about it first. So I think maybe what that tells me, looking back on it, is that he must have been tired of me going back and forth. Mm-hmm. He must have been aware that I kept saying I'm not drinking and then drinking. I mean, he probably didn't even register anymore all the times I said I was done drinking, because I would say, oh, we drink too much. Let's only drink on weekends. And he'd be like, okay.
Yeah, okay, fine, because it's not an issue for him, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then by Wednesday, I'd be trying to get him to drink with me. And he'd say, oh, I thought we were only drinking on weekends. And then I'd say, oh, well, no, that's dumb. We're not doing that.
And you guys you have three boys, and by this time they're all out of the house, right? Pretty much.
We still had, they were teenagers, but two were away at school, and our youngest was still at home. But they were still, very much part of the in and out of our household. And they didn't. The older ones really weren't the kind of kids that were that interested in partying and drinking, and still aren't. And our youngest was just kind of hitting that age of social experimentation. So it was good timing for him that I quit drinking when I did, because then I was able to really kind of come at parenting him from a different point of view. I think I was able to be stable for them, and so I think that's good. But I feel like I wish I could go back and do those years over with a lot more emotional presence than I had. I think I really was kind of lost to myself in a lot of ways, and I think I missed out on being there for them. But kids aren't always aware of that, and they know what they have and they don't really know what they don't have. And sometimes the things we do wrong as parents don't really show up for decades. So I don't know. You can interview them in a few years and see what they say.
Yeah, all perspectives are so interesting as far as the family unit is concerned and the strong relationships you have with other people. Did you find yourself becoming a more authentic person? Because I think that's something that's out there for people that they don't realize, that because in the world you're talking about, right? Let's, how do I look? What do people on the outside think of me? I have to drink in my hotel room. I can't see them at the bar. I'm out there. I'm a successful woman. There's a lot. The stakes are pretty high. To be authentic might be to move away from that, which is success through the eyes of others. Which, if you're like me at all, that's super important, right? When I'm having a bad day. How did you find yourself? How did you find your authenticity? I mean, and you've talked about it. You didn't do like AA, and that's what's cool about this podcast, or at least I like to think. It doesn't matter how you stop. You stopped, and it's promotion by attraction. You're an attractive person. You put yourself out there. You're helping people. So how does this happen? How did you find your authenticity?
Well, I went to therapy, and I didn't take very many sessions, but I probably altogether like maybe 6 or 8 times over the period of a year or two. And then I'd learn something, I'd go away and work on it for a while and then come back and work on something else. And I think that is the biggest change. The more that I really learned to be safe and grounded in myself and just real, the more that it became comfortable to be me. So even though I didn't get sober in AA, I still looked at those 12 steps with a lot of curiosity and thought, okay, why does that help? Why is that important? Resentments. Why does it help to look at your resentments? What does that have to do with drinking? Why does it help to help others? What does that have to do with staying sober? So appreciating that, hey, if this works for other people, it has value. How can I make use of that, in what I'm doing? So definitely becoming more authentic was the unexpected payout. I mean, I would have feared being authentic. If you'd have told me, Jean, you're going to quit drinking and you're going to be more real, that would have sounded really bad to me. I would not have taken that deal.
Really,
because
for
I was
me
so
now,
invested.
Totally. For me now, it's all I know. But back, I don't even know. It wasn't so long ago. Like from a time perspective, I think it was so long ago as a person. I'm still totally flawed, but looking back then, I mean, I was just a complete mess. And, masquerading, and I don't know what I was telling people on any given day, but it certainly wasn't the truth, and it certainly wasn't real. Today,
was it what you thought they wanted to hear? Were you just saying what you needed to say to stay safe?
It was what made me, in my own mind, look good, whatever that was, which was 99% of the time bullshit. But now it's, and you talk about this too, which is something that I find so interesting. I'm working, right? I'm getting away from the people pleasing, from telling people what they want to hear, telling people what they need to hear. And it's one of those things where if somebody comes to me and asks me for advice, I can tell them, what they need to hear. I guess I've developed enough as a person. But if I see somebody doing something wrong and I'm not their sponsor, right? Or, I'm not related to them, I feel like I don't need to tell them, what's going on. Like you mentioned something so interesting about like gossiping, right? Like, when it comes down to your core values, if you're around somebody and, they're saying something, it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, totally. I get you. And then you go to another person and they're sharing something about the person you just talked to. And you're like, oh yeah. I get it. And it's like I'm a prisoner to my audience sometimes. I was
totally, yeah.
I mean, again, it's another thing where I've gotten better at it, but I still need to work on that. And that's being authentic, and it feels good when you walk away from a situation like that. When you're true to yourself and you're kind, and you're grounded. How did you develop that skill? Because you referred to yourself as a shapeshifter. once upon a time, which I think is so interesting.
Yeah, I think that's how I stayed safe, was really whoever's in front of me, like who do I need to be for you to like me? So, like, do I need to be funny? Do I need to talk about that friend who I was just with? Like, you don't like her? Okay, I don't like her, at least as long as I'm talking to you. You know, like, you just sort of, you learn to sort of change however you need to change to feel safe with the person you're with. And that is, you know, that's one way of defining codependency. I mean, I thought codependency meant, like, living with an alcoholic or helping someone else be dependent on something.
Enabling.
But enabling. But the way that the phrase I learned can be applied is that you're dependent on other people for your identity. So when you do that, for me, when I was doing that, I first of all, like, again, valued zero value on what I knew. So I might know that I just had the opposite conversation with person X, but now I'm with person Y. And so I'm going to pretend that other thing didn't happen because this person doesn't know that. And I'm going to say what feels good to them. And I would kind of walk away thinking, why did I do that? Like, why? I know that wasn't right, but it just, like, why do I do that? And as I learn to value what I know and learn to really hold my core values as a non-negotiable, then it gave me the strength to trust that I'm going to be okay if this person that I'm talking to right now decides that I'm not for them. I'm still going to be okay. I don't have to sell myself out for that because I've got me and I value me. And that was new. And also, another thing that you kind of touched on about being a public personality, I remember saying to my therapist that I felt like I had built this fake version of myself, this suit of armor that the world loved, and that the real me was kind of like, you know how your fingers get all raisiny when you stay in the hot tub too long? Or we call it a hot tub. I think you call it a spa down there.
Hot tub,
in the tub. Yeah. So I felt like I was all, like, sweaty and shrunken inside this suit of armor, and that everyone loved the external version of me. And if they knew that the real me was this sort of diminished, withering ghost inside the suit, that they would be completely disgusted. And so I remember saying to her, I need you to help me. I need you to help me kill this version of myself that I built. I built this fake version of myself and I can't live with her anymore. I need help to kill her and to step out and be me. And this is what I thought recovery was going to be, was like this sort of violent death of this persona. And she just she had, like, a physical reaction to that, and she said, no, like, no, we're not going to kill anybody. Don't, like, let's let go of that idea. And she helped me see that actually wasn't entirely fake, but that it was an aspect of my personality, my ability to step to the mic and be a spokesperson, my ability to present, is actually a gift and a tool. And that it's something I can draw on when I need to, like right now, talking to you, or maybe in a negotiation meeting, or for a few minutes during a presentation. But I have to understand that it's not all of me. It's an aspect of me, and that I need to learn to use it and then come back to my authentic self. And that my goal through therapy was to spend more time as my core self, my authentic self. That's okay when I'm not being, the only version of myself that I valued. That's okay that don't look as nice without makeup. That's okay that I am an introvert most of the time. And that version that I was presenting was kind of an elevated ability to speak to a point or to do a job, but that I can also then choose to not always use that.
Yeah.
And just wrapping my head around that, and being able to turn it off. I don't know if you have any friends that are actors or comedians, but you know how they're exhausting people that are always on.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
yes.
but they're always doing a bit, and you're like, wait, is this a conversation or is this a bit?
Yeah, we got a guy. Totally. Yes.
And when they reveal their real self to you, then you're really like, oh, this is good stuff. Like now I like this person more, and trusting that I could have that own experience with myself. So for me, that's how it's felt to really get more authentic.
And you go back to the go ahead.
No, it's okay. Ask your question.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, when you go back to the thing about talking about other people, or, person X, person Y, or people pleasing, telling people what they want to hear. I've noticed by practicing what you're talking about in my own way, right? I certainly haven't perfected it, but I don't deal, like you said, you're okay with this person maybe not being okay with you. Like, I don't really find myself in situations like that anymore with people that are you right. I mean, like, you're 10 years in or 11 years in, like, you have less conversations with people that are gossiping. You just find yourself moving towards a different crowd. It still happens. And I can still be the eye of the storm on the wrong day. But and now more than ever, I'm like, man, I feel like I need to take a shower after I do that. The one thing I wanted to ask you, like, because you have so many ways to apply certain ideas. How do you apply that? Like, if you're in a conversation with someone and they're starting to take it down a different path, and this is obviously in sobriety, you're on the right side of all this. How do you snuff that conversation out, or do you just take it in a different direction?
I try to catch myself if I'm feeling titillated. That's not usually a good sign. It's like, ooh, yeah, say more. My friend calls it her inner growth meter. Your inner growth meter goes off and you're like, oh, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I found that one really good turn of phrase is to say, mostly for my own benefit, but it usually helps the person I'm with get on track too, is, I'm trying not to gossip. So as I'm having this conversation, I'm asking myself, what would I say if that person was here with us right now? So I'm really trying to think of how I can say this in a way that would feel okay if so-and-so was listening to us talk about this. And I usually find by kind of saying that, it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
Because it's a way to sort of graciously put yourself back on track and let it be known that this is something that you're trying to correct maybe for your own benefit, without making the person that you're talking with feel terrible for bringing it up, because you also don't want to shame other people.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we're doing this right, we elevate the people we're around and they elevate us.
That's the idea. That's totally the idea.
Yeah. So, even when people are behaving badly, they're not usually terrible. They're just sort of, we're permitting ourselves to get into a pattern.
Yeah.
And that's what feels best, I guess, if we can pull each other out of that.
How have you broken out of being overly invested in what people think?
Well, aging helps. So, because you really can't. You have to learn to make peace with what's happening with the looks and the body and the aging and everything. That helps. I think. I really think that's where the mental health stuff comes in. Of like, listen, what do I want for myself? Because being on that pedestal wasn't good for me. And Brene Brown calls it hustling for our worthiness, and it's really empty. And I've won a lot of awards. I've had a lot of accomplishments. And the moment I got them, I dropped them and reached for the next rung. I mean, there just was no satisfaction in it. So that's where gratitude, I think, really helps. And that's a great practice in recovery, is just stopping and really appreciating where you're at right now. That helps you, I think, decide, like, do I want to stay grounded in where I'm at? Am I in a good place? Do I value how I'm doing? And the word safety comes up for me a lot, and I don't know where I ever got the idea that I wasn't safe, because I had quite a stable, loving childhood. But for me, there was just always this sort of scrambling for position and this need to be okay and to assure that I was okay. And so sometimes I just have to do that, Pete, and just be like, hey, Jean, like, you're okay. You're good here. There's no need. This is a kind of like there's a part of my brain that is always looking for the tiger, where's the danger?
You ooze positivity. Like, it's very,
do I?
Yeah. You're easy to talk to. Even emailing with you, like, real quick, you're funny. You're not like, because a lot of people what I'm trying to say is people that are in the AA community, some people, not every, it's a very like welcoming environment from what I've found. But like, if you don't go to meetings, oh, well, we talked about your dad, right? Like, maybe they're considered like a quote unquote dry drunk. Now, you never really got involved with AA, but it's very clear that what you're doing has enabled you to, live life like a loose shirt, like I like to say. Like, you're a light person, right? You have light coming through you, right? And it seems like you're just kind of floating a little bit. I mean, I'm sure you have your days, right? But how do you stay that way? What if somebody doesn't want to go to a meeting? Like, if somebody doesn't want to get involved, if that's just too much, whatever, how do you continue to stay vigilant and also stay free?
Well, first, thank you for that compliment. That's a huge compliment, and
that's true.
That tells me I'm on track, because that's really, lightness is something I aspired to. I was just way too uptight, and that's my default. So without working at it, I think the coil springs back. I tighten up again. I do recommend to people, pick a path and stick with it. So we have a lot of options right now. It's amazing the amount of options that we have in recovery, because the internet has blown so much wide open, right? So there's different programs. AA was the only program for a long time, and it's a good program. I mean, I definitely don't dismiss it, and I can tell you in retrospect that had I gone to AA on the first day, I wouldn't have been turned out. I would have been supported and encouraged. And I do drop in on a local women's meeting once in a while just for the fellowship. And they're so good to me. They're so kind and welcoming. So pick a path and stick with it. So the first thing you have to do if you want to quit drinking is quit drinking. Like, you literally have to stop. And that's the hardest part, really. I mean, physically getting through the detox and safely getting physically unhooked from addiction is difficult. But the mental hook is the long-term thing that is hard. And I think I kept playing this game that there was always a reason. I always had an excuse. And when I finally was able to make a change, it was because I made that decision that there is no reason to drink. Like, I have to stop making this bargain with myself that every day there's a reason or there's an excuse. So that also means that, like, even if you get cancer, even when a parent dies, even if your marriage blows up, like, no matter how hard it is, alcohol's not going to help.
No matter what.
Even if there's half a bottle in the fridge. It can be that simple. I mean, how many people say, well, I had to drink, there was half a bottle in the fridge. You know what? If you're treating your body like a garbage can, you might as well pour it down the sink as pour it down your throat. So get rid of the alcohol and stop drinking. And I feel like that seems almost too obvious, but isn't it the hardest part? Isn't it the biggest piece of this?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up going, for me, I dug so deep, I needed to go to rehab. I went to a halfway house after that. Like, I just needed like that separation, Jean. I couldn't be around it. And that worked for me. I mean, but stopping and staying stopped was the hardest part. Yeah.
And then identifying the patterns that got you there. And that's where rehab and residential treatment can be so helpful, because it takes you out of the pattern you built that was perpetuating the cycle of drinking, and gives you a bit of a chance to look at it and say, how do I need to rebuild that life so I can re-enter it and sustain this alcohol-free thing? Like, what was it about your life that made it necessary to cope with alcohol, but also cope with anything. Like, what can you change so that you don't have to cope with it? Because sobriety is stopping the behavior, but recovery is building your life so you don't have to cope, so that you can actually live your life and enjoy it and be yourself and feel good and not need to constantly escape from how it feels to be you. And that's a big job. That takes time.
What are some of the bigger things that you do to maintain that?
I slowed down a lot, and I think it was a lot of internal stuff for me, and figuring out that I was really, really hooked into external validation. So that meant I said yes to everything people asked me to do. I took no help in doing it because I didn't want anyone to notice that I was possibly incompetent. So I had to do it all myself so I could hide my flaws. And
that's great.
And then I started to really identify what are the things that are causing me to have that anxiety. So performing was huge, performing music. So I stopped performing music. And then but I started writing. So I started blogging and writing books, and that feeds my creativity. And it's really very similar to songwriting, except I don't have to stand alone on stage in a spotlight to do it.
Yeah.
So it was hard to stop that, but I did. I realized, okay, that's something that's got to go.
Did you start blogging on the first day?
Yeah.
That takes balls.
I had no idea that people would read it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you started blogging on the first day, and that was almost your outlet, which is, I mean, I wouldn't recommend people just put themselves out there like that. I'd say give yourself a little time, but it worked for you. And that outlet does feel good. I mean, that outlet feels good.
Yeah. It felt good. And here's why. First of all, I stayed anonymous for the first 2 years.
No way.
So I don't recommend. Yeah, no, I didn't out myself until I realized that all of the people I was reaching a lot of people, but they were not people in my community.
Who were you blogging as? Just like
Unpickled.
Okay.
So
that was
I
it. Okay.
set up a Gmail account that was like Unpickled or Pickled No More or something, and just randomly chose this name Unpickled because I had heard that phrase like, you know, a pickle can't become a cucumber again. And I thought, well, I'm like, what am I when I'm not pickled anymore. I'm not drunk all the time anymore, but I'm not that. So anyway, I picked this name Unpickled. I blogged as that for a long time, but I started, the first thing that happened that really helped, and I wasn't expecting it, was that people commented. And I had no idea how helpful it was going to be. The recovery community is not judgmental.
Mm-mm.
They're not exclusionary for the most part. You might get the odd person who's like, what? You only drank X amount a day? But most of them are just, they're just supportive. So I didn't realize how good that was going to feel. So the first few comments just were like water on a cactus. I mean, it felt so good and so helpful. And then the next thing that happened a few days later, which I had no idea because I was so focused on myself, which is so funny now, but somebody commented and said, oh, I'm on day 1. And, if you can do 14 days or 3 days or whatever I was at that point, I can get through today. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't realize that I thought I was the last person who was ever going to quit drinking.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, when people come in and have
so
less time, you're like, oh my
struggle.
gosh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so for somebody to then say I was helping them, that was really great because I did not expect that. I thought, are you kidding? I'm such a mess. How can I help anybody? But then I really felt like, well, now I can't drink. Now I have to keep going.
It's the accountability, however you find it.
Yeah. So it's kind of a push and pull, right? The people ahead of you pull you forward, and the people behind you propel you from behind, and you kind of get swooped into this really group procession of I don't know, it's like a togetherness thing. It's a connection, but it's also, hey, we're all moving forward. We're all trying to do better. And we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to explain, our brokenness. We can just kind of show up and be where we're at today and understand that we're all in this together. And just by being in it, that's all. Like, that's, you just have to show up. And that kind of community is so, so lovely. So if you can tap into that in any capacity, by going to a meeting or by joining something online or by commenting on a blog or listening, sometimes listening to conversations like this and to your podcast and mine just gives people the courage to know that they'll have a place in that community, and that, oh, this person changed and that it's possible, and all of that. You just get swooped into it, and then it helps. It
really does.
And
listening to this,
if you need more help, it's the big heart fill part of it. The Grinch, where his heart bursts. The screen at the end. It's really that. And
so you said if you need more help,
then
I don't want. Yeah.
If you need more help, then reach for more structure. I mean, a lot of people resist 12-step because it feels too structured, but it's like an exoskeleton. Your body's all weak and you can't pull yourself up. Like, strap on this exoskeleton, strap on this program, and it'll walk you around until you're strong enough to walk yourself again. And it's like a built-in program. And if you're a little bit earlier in the trajectory, if you feel like, gosh, I still have a little bit of control over my addiction, I think I can do this on my own, then maybe you can go more, DIY and pick and choose from different programs the way I did.
Mm-hmm.
But, if that doesn't work for you, then just keep reaching for more structure until you get the support you need. I'm a big fan of abstinence-based recovery. I think, harm reduction is essential in some settings where people need to work towards abstinence-based recovery. It's very complex and everybody's different. But for me, what works for me is to be free of drugs and alcohol, recreational drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
If somebody needs medicine that they're working with their doctor to get there, then that's what they need. But to me, that's what recovery means. And so I think you kind of have to really pick a lane, pick how you're going to do this, and then really get it done. And just don't stop.
Were drugs ever a part of your story?
They were not. And I think for me, that was really some part of me that knew I would have no control if I went there. I really was almost fearful of them because I really felt like I couldn't. If I had relief, if I really felt relief from the amount of anxiety and fear and the pain of being me, that I would never go back to not using them. So for me, that was some kind of inner guardrail of, self-preservation that I had. And I didn't have to deal with that. And it is a tough battle. I mean, I feel for people who are working through that. I just think it's so hard, but it's doable. And we just have to keep each other going and keep believing in this better life and this ability to actually, that we really can do this and be free. That's the thing. Like, if we can be, that is total freedom, I guess, is what we're reaching for. And it's why we drink. It's why people use, is to try to be free of, pain and hurt and discomfort. And yet, ironically, the way we get that freedom is to be without it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I got like one or two more things for you. One, what's it like for you? I'm sure there's a real outpouring of women, men asking you questions, thanking you. What is that like for you? And, what kind of questions do you get?
Well, I would urge anybody who is talking about their recovery out loud and putting themselves forward as a person who's holding space for others or who's being public in their recovery in any capacity, you really have to keep your ego in check. And you really have to not buy into the idea that it's your super greatness that's making this happen.
Yeah.
You know? So when somebody, I was getting, initially when I first started doing the podcast and put my name out there and was receiving positive feedback, I did sort of say thank you, oh, great, I could appreciate that I helped someone. But what I found was then if somebody relapsed, I was so just devastated because I took it as a personal rejection or a personal failure, or somehow it was on me. And I realized, you know what, I have to, if I'm going to do this, I have to release myself from the outcomes of other people's experience, good or bad. So I really, when someone tells me that my work got them sober, I correct them and say, my work was a tool that you used to do your work and get sober. And I don't take any credit for anybody else's sobriety, because that's not me doing that. I put a bit of time in, and I'm using my gifts in a way that is helpful and useful, and that helps me stay sober. So I really work to stay on the right side of it. And what that helps me do now is when it feels like the time is right to step down from doing my podcast, I know that what happens immediately is this nosedive in your stats, and people don't know who you are pretty quick, and you don't show up in Google searches. And I don't feel an attachment to that. I don't fear disappearing, because I just honor this opportunity that I've had to kind of be part of this magical thing that's taking place, this recovery community and this, grand universe unfolding. I feel like I stepped up and I took my part in it. I was offered to be, a cog in the machine, and that was great. And now I know I can step back from it, and it will carry on without me, and I can just honor the joy of what I did and the amazing experience of having done it, and let that be it, and not tie it to my self-worth. That was a very long-winded answer.
It was a great answer. It was almost, it was kind of, it served as some good advice for me. Last thing, first of all, you're awesome. And one of the cooler things about media today is that the stuff you have produced, as far as the podcast, which you say you're going to step away from, that is going to live forever. And, where can people find that? Because it's all, the cool thing about a lot of what we do, like, I think somebody could go listen to the first podcast I did, and it's the same thing, it's evergreen. How can people find your podcast, your books? Talk a little bit about that.
Everything that I'm connected to is linked through my website, jeanmccarthy.ca.
Okay, which we'll put on here.
The Bubble Hour link is there. Thank you. Yeah. The Bubble Hour is there. My blog Unpickled is there, and I've left that up, warts and all, 10 years of me showing my various uncomfortable stages of growth is there, and then there's links to buy the books. We're recording this in early 2022, and I have a new book coming out called Prepare to Be Alcohol Free, and that should be out in early February. Amazon's generally the best, easiest place to get that worldwide. And that is a book with all kinds of tips on things you can do in the contemplation stage, before you quit drinking, to set yourself up for success after you quit drinking. So there can be things that we just don't think about. And there's a lot of books about once you get to the action stage of making change and what to do when it's time to change. But we don't really think about ways we can really reinforce our efforts before we make the change.
That's amazing.
That book, I think, will be really helpful. Yeah, I don't think there's anything like it out there. So yeah,
that's amazing, because I think there's a lot, whatever, you're drunk. So it's not, I don't want to say like it's time wasted because it kind of is what it is. But I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about stopping drinking when they are drinking. And if there's a way to take advantage of that time, because we're definitely thinking about it, right? Or they are, that's cool that you're putting out a tool there for those folks.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's going to be good. I'm really excited about it. I feel like it's something that would have helped me at the time. So yeah, I'm hoping to just take the lessons I've learned and continue to share them going forward. I'm not an expert, but what I feel like is what I've been is a kind of an amalgamator, a hub for storytelling and idea sharing. And so what I'm really trying to do is kind of scoop all that together and organize it for people and just be a resource and just shine a light. And I'm glad to hear you say that you can hear hopefulness and happiness in my voice, because I just want that for everyone, and I really believe it's possible.
Yeah, today you were once again a resource and a light. So thank you so much for spending time with me, with us, and this will be up tomorrow, so I'll send you a link to this. Oh. And if you ever need anything from me, you just let me know.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the work you're doing. It helps me, bring my work to an end, knowing that other people are carrying, the message forward with just so much dedication and hope and connection. It's a wonderful thing we're part of. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jean. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.